What is up, fellas? TheGOOB here. Sorry for the late start. I was cooking my dog some dinner and then my computer decided to freeze for a little while. So I have some exciting news. Oh, Mr. Slav is here. Sorry for the late start. Let me turn off my video in the background. What's up, Mr. Slav? Let's see if we can get this working with you. Doesn't look like you have audio or video turned on yet. I will, keep an eye on that. Yeah, I joined audio on my phone, not on the computer. I have that muted on there on my desktop. So if you do get your audio working, we should hopefully all be able to hear you without any echo, without any issues. But chat, let me know if that's the case, if he actually gets his audio on. So in the meantime, I have some exciting news. I have been talking with Mark. Yeah, no problem, man. I've been talking with Mark, who's just a guest on Danny's show, and it seems like I'm getting my first guest on this show next week, hopefully. Still working out the details, but he emailed me like right before this stream, so I haven't even had a chance to respond yet. But it seems like next week he'll be on the show next Sunday. So that is exciting. I'm looking forward to talking to him. Hopefully we'll be talking about the hidden history of America, because that's something I'm rather interested in. I think that there's a lot of history hidden in America, going not only, in some of our more recent times, but especially going back, into ancient times. I think there's a lot missed. So that should be fun. I'm excited about that. If you guys have any other guests, your audio is muted, but it's connected now. So, but yeah, if you guys have any other guest recommendations, feel free to recommend them. I'll reach out if I can. I don't have any social media, like I don't have a Twitter, so I don't know how effective I could make a Twitter, but I'd have 0 followers, 0 tweets. I don't know how effective an account like that reaching out to people would be. But, if you have an email address, especially, I will definitely, I'll definitely reach out for them, try and get them on the show. So if you have any recommendations, let me know. Yeah, like I said, Mr. Slav, your audio is connected now. I can ask you to unmute it. Should give you a little pop-up. Now I should be able to hear you. I don't, though. I don't hear you. I feel like I'm hearing little noises, but I'm not hearing you say anything. So I'll continue with the updates.
Can you hear me?
Can you not? You should be able to hear me through. There we go. Sorry. So now you can hear me?
Yeah, let me mute the YouTube.
My bad. Yeah, I thought I had already done that. All right. So yeah, we can hear each other. The audience should be able to hear you as well. Chat, let us know if there is an echo or any audio issues, but I think we're good.
So, I noticed you have like the same thing going on, which you did last week. And am I right in assuming that you're just like talking about like all the different types of history of like humans worshiping, higher powers throughout, like recorded history? Is that what you were doing last week? Because you got an image of like Osiris and Zeus and all that.
Right.
That's my assumption.
So yeah, I mean,
I haven't listened to it yet.
It's going to be very much the same as last week, but more so what I'm, I guess, attempting to do is make the connections that the gods were real in the past. They were these real beings that were actually interacting with people on Earth. That's at least my belief. And I wanted to try and solidify that idea a little bit, go over some of the thoughts, that are leading me to that conclusion. So.
I mean, one of the ones I always thought was, for instance, worshiping deities that represent things in nature. And one that I've always understood is worshiping the sun. Without the sun, like let's say you snap your fingers, you know, they say it takes 8 minutes for the sun's light and energy to reach the earth. The sun goes out, you got 8 minutes, what are you gonna do? Without the sun, like, the world's just done, right?
Right. Yeah, that's like the oldest religion, I believe, was sun worshiping. It makes sense.
It makes sense. Worship the sea because it provides water, food, and all that, and all this stuff. But thing is, that one of the fallacies is and this is what was done with, it was observed in much primitive cultures like in the Americas, in Africa, and all that is appeasing natural forces that provide us life. They say how big the sun is, they say how far away it is, and that it is like magnitudes and exponential magnitudes larger than the Earth, and it operates on like hydrogen fusion. Yeah, there's nothing on Earth I can do as a human being
to verify
that anything that the sun does, right?
Right.
So that like I can understand much like earlier religions that appease to the forces of nature, and it makes sense, it tracks, but it's just like well, Poseidon, like when I studied like the Greek gods and stuff, like to me Poseidon was interesting. He was god of the seas, god of earth and the earthquakes and horses, and I mean he creates his kids by like coming on the ground. Like, all that shit's like in what, 4th grade you learn that shit? Yeah, it's kind of like like it does make teachers uncomfortable when you ask them like, what does it mean Zeus raped so and so to create a child? But, like, I don't think that's really fun for like 5th grade teachers to have to answer that question. But
so it kind of sounds like you're making, or at least a minute ago you were making like the pyramid argument, which is that the reason we see pyramids all over the world is because it's the most basic shape. And so you're saying like these worshiping of the sun and the sea that you see across so many different cultures, you're basically making that same argument that it's kind of just like the most basic and logical, that it makes. Is that what am I reading that correctly?
I mean, yeah, something like that. I mean, I guess with the pyramids it's also is like it's the easiest thing to build. You just keep stacking and stacking, and you then realize you need a little bit more stability, so you just, and then also it's like you just want to have the highest thing, look over as far as you can see. Look at that, it's a landmark. The whole thing of what, like, they've been around for so long, so that, I mean, they're trying to reach the heavens. I don't know, whatever they saw in the heavens might have been ridiculous. Not like ridiculous, but like awesome. Not like cool awesome, but just like you're in awe of seeing.
Yes, the literal awesome, yeah.
Yeah. And then and being Russian, like Russia, even before Saint Cyril brought Christianity up there, they used to be pagans, and they pagans that come like because there's a major Viking influence as well. And for instance, we have a holiday in Russia called Maslenitsa, and it's basically the arrival of spring. And you know how like you see people like running around a maypole.
Yeah.
Like a giant pole and all that. Yeah, it's just a tradition of like
there's a lot of blending of different religions. Yeah, you see that throughout. That's a very common thing, is that you see these one religion kind of blend into another and then into another, and yeah.
And it makes sense. I mean, this is before the time people could just only remember like, oh, the sun goes up, the sun goes down, the sun goes up, the sun goes down. Like that's the most basic form of keeping time that they had. But it's like you have these like what they said Christmas is like the winter solstice or some astronomical event.
Right, I've seen it tied to hallucinogenic mushrooms and to pagan rituals and all this stuff, yeah. And I think there likely is some truth, at least, into those. Like, I think the blending of religions is absolutely real. Last week, I talked a lot about how Plato um, played a monumental role in the transforming of religions. Pre-Plato, you mostly saw these pagan, multi-god religions, and then Plato kind of solidified this idea of the modern Christian God. And even beyond Christianity, it bled into all of these other religions as well, but of this like totally infallible, unquestionable, unwavering God that really didn't exist so much before that. The gods before that were these very human, like, emotional. They get angry, they laugh, they cry, they even die. And then now you have these modern gods that are immortal and all
Well, wouldn't
powerful.
you see is how, because I mean, like my background in education is my degree in geology, and we also learn about the history of like how geology became a science, and it is the accounts of the Greeks and the Romans, and they basically were like, yes, we still have like all these gods we prescribe these powers to in nature, but we see like natural occurrences, right? And
Right.
it's almost, and what I like, my always biggest criticism of any religion, of anything, is the institutionalism. Because if you're, like, my always thing has always been, like, if you're a human being, and I've solidified on this, I'm not ever changing my opinion on this. If you're a human being and you truly believe that there's a higher power, like, it does not require an intermediary, like a priest or a rabbi or an imam. It does not require a building like a cathedral, a synagogue, or a mosque. I mean, don't get me wrong; they're all beautifully built and great, like congregation. I understand all that, but like it is almost like, well, however they wrote about Moses, like God came out to him as a burning bush, right? And then somebody was explaining Saint Francis of Assisi. He was one who was like, you don't should me sitting in the pew if you want to have spirituality. You need to go out, just be by yourself. It'll come to you. And that's what I thought. Like why like be forced into you know pageantry and ritual and all this?
So you're actually
It should come to you. It should if you see a lot of people who like get super hardcore back into being like religious or Christian, a lot of them go through like moments of life, moments where they're about to lose their life, and some sort of saving grace, whether it was another person that just happened to walk by, or just
yeah, they
some
have a
like
religious
weird.
experience. Yeah.
They're like, I should have lost my life. Everything that should have happened could have happened, but something just like
That come to Jesus moment. Yeah.
I mean, come to whoever, but it just makes you think that maybe there's just something out there, but yeah.
Yeah. So some of the stuff you're saying is in a roundabout way. It's some of the stuff I was gonna be talking about. I get where you're coming from. I get what you're saying about, you don't need an institution. At the same time, though, we're dealing with ideas that are over 10,000 years old. I mean, the flood, if it was the Younger Dryas that they're referring to, which it's pretty widely accepted by a lot of people that it is, that was 10 to 12,000 years ago. And these stories have remained intact since then. I mean, you have the story of Moses being told in Sumerian religion as well. It's almost identical. The names are different, but it's almost they're landing on Mount Ararat. I mean, it's almost word for word the exact same story. And so for thousands of years, these stories are being preserved. And you do need an institution for that. You need an incredibly strong institution for that, because it's lasting through regime changes and civilization collapses and takeovers. I mean, it's pretty baffling to me how you have this consistency of religion through such long periods of time, when you do have like when a state comes in and takes over another state, and yet the religion still survives. Like, and it happens over and over and over again for thousands of years. That's pretty remarkable to me. And that's one of the indications to me that this stuff is based off of something real. Like, to hold that much importance, to hold that much significance, to last relatively unmolested for that length of time through that much turmoil, I mean, really, it had to be treated as the most sacred, important information ever. Which I get that's what religion is, but you know.
I do think I'm using the word institutionalism in a different manner than what you just described it.
Yes, and I recognize the difference there, but that, like I said, in a kind of indirect way, you were touching on them.
I mean, how much knowledge do we have from the Franciscan monks when it comes to, you know, science and medicine? Do you like to drink beer, Goob?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, well, we can thank the monks.
I tried to do an all-beer diet for a month once because of the monks. I was going to live in their footsteps. I didn't make it.
Yeah, no, that's just like a whole level. I have my legitimate criticisms about Islam, but they had, such vast amounts of knowledge. I mean, they say they created the zero. I mean, it took that long, but I mean,
they created robots thousands of years ago.
Yeah. Like automatons.
Yeah, they were doing some fancy stuff.
I mean, the institutionalism of preserving knowledge is, it's instrumental. I mean, they say the burning of Alexandria and the sacking of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad were like two most some of the worst things to happen to the progression of knowledge, human intelligence.
Yeah. And I mean, just to think though that like those, well, yes, you're saying those were particularly bad. Those are in no way unique events. Like, that is happening constantly throughout all of humanity's history. Like, that's a never-ending process of information destruction and degradation. And so it's remarkable that anything is making it through, much less you can draw all of these parallels to all of these religions across the world. And so this information, like I said, has made it through for over 10,000 years, relatively unmolested across pretty much the entire planet. And that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and it does make you also think it's like people went from like revering sources of like that provide like what they perceived as natural powers, like paganism and the worship of natural deities, and then there had to be some sort of switch where they described it to all of it just because of one intelligent creator.
And that was largely Plato and his students. It was a process that went on for a couple hundred years, but it largely started with Plato, and he really went towards this all-powerful being that is supreme over everything and totally infallible in any way, no signs of weakness of any sort kind of deal, away from these pagan gods that, like I said, were much more human. They had emotions and seemed and actually directly interacted with people, at least in the stories and myths, right? I mean, they were having children with them for so.
I get that. Oh, before I forget, you asked earlier in the episode about guests.
Yeah. You got one for me?
Comments on one of the earlier videos brought it up, the history homos.
Yeah, I don't know how to contact them, but
I did put one of their email. I can put it in.
Oh yeah. For sure, I'll write that down right now.
They like.
Yeah, if you give me an email, I guarantee I'll reach out.
Yeah, you're really into questioning like the record of antiquity.
For sure. That's like the main concept of the show, basically, yeah.
Yeah, and they're really into that, and antiquity all the way up to what are they lying to us about, certain European leaders in the 30s and the 40s. Catch my drift.
Yeah. I definitely don't. While I focus on antiquities, I don't think that the narrative is, peachy keen more recently either. You know what I'm saying? It's just not my focus as much. But yeah, there's a lot of funny business. A lot of funny business.
Yeah. Have you ever looked into like stuff like Seattle and stuff? How like they have like what they call now the underground city, but it
I
was
lived in Seattle for a while actually. I visited it, and you
so
know,
they have like the
places
whole city built on one level, and then they just got
built on top of it. Yeah.
yeah.
So places like Seattle at least provide an explanation. If you want to accept that explanation or not, totally up to you. They at least have an explanation. There are other places though that they have this underground city or town or whatever, because I think the even more perplexing one is there's like these old like gold mining towns, and some of them are built on even older towns. Like there was no one supposedly out there before that. This town didn't exist until the mine was, you know, started, and we know when the mine was started and all that, but it's built on this already pre-existing town, that there's genuinely no explanation for from the mainstream or, you know, anyone in the town or anything like that. And so some of these at least have an explanation that you can accept if you want, but then there's more examples where it's just like, yeah, this really is quite interesting.
Yeah, and then those are the types of places where like what they use ground penetrating radar
Mm-hmm.
and all that, because all those places in the West are not like heavily vegetated like places in the Amazon and Central America. So
Yeah.
would it be like Native American structures? Because they're always trying, like they talk about the mounds that are all along the Missouri.
Right. So I've talked about this. I talked some of it about this last week. There's these like Google Earth guys. They look on Google Earth for things and they go and visit them and check them out. And they've found a lot of really interesting things here in the U.S. CF Apps was a guy who's passed away now, but he used to do that. He was very good at finding interesting structures in the U.S. There's the Sage Wall in Montana. There's the Montana megaliths in Montana. I showed those a couple of weeks ago. Those are absolutely man-made. And the Indians do not take credit for them. And then you're talking about the mounds. There are Indian mounds for sure, but there's also these Welsh burial mounds that seem to be here in the U.S. with these, you know, white people buried in them, these Welsh people. And that's largely been covered up. I actually talked to an archaeologist in a bar who was on a dig, and I forget the state, but the Lakota tribe was the tribe, and they were digging a mound that they thought was the Lakota tribe, but as they got further and further down, they were realizing it looked like a Welsh mound, and they actually had bodies that they were about to DNA test, and the Lakota tribe shut it down, and the U.S. government gives them ultimate authority. It's whatever the Lakota tribe says you're allowed to do is what you do. And that's for all these tribes. It's not specific to the Lakota tribe. So, yeah, there's some very interesting. There in Texas, there's this like 50-mile long wall that's buried underground. There's some very interesting things in America that we really don't know where they're coming from, because yeah, the Native Americans don't take credit for all of this stuff. And it was thought there were no megalithic structures in the United States whatsoever because the Indians weren't doing that. But then there are. They're definitely, like, if you aren't familiar with the Montana megaliths, go ahead and give those a Google. They're pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's always just so much weird stuff. I mean, there's one of the that episode where I had you bring up the Bosnian pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
I was at the end, but you already ended it. It was the Great Zimbabwe. I forgot what it's called. It was like the Great Zimbabwe stone structures. But the only reason I brought it up was to be like, this is the like only oldest thing that they have. Let's see, what's it called? The Great Zimbabwe is just what it's called. It's from like the 11th century. But it's just interesting that that's all that we can find from this, from the continent where like humans have existed the longest.
If you believe in the out of Africa theory, which I personally do not subscribe to. But yeah, no, I think that one of the
I don't
biggest
either. Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things going on here is the underestimation of the forces of destruction. I think we vastly underestimate the human element of destruction, and I think we vastly underestimate the natural element of destruction. I mean,
Oh, that's what is it? What is it? When I was doing geology, and I learned more about this one, like on our final year when we went up and did stuff in Montana and Wyoming. There is a class, school of thought called destructivism. Catastrophism.
Yes.
Catastrophism.
Which was the main school of thought
the
before the
Snake
1500s.
River Valley. Like everything from Montana all the way through Idaho, all the way out to the Cascades. The Snake River Valley is like one of the best like indicators of catastrophism.
Yeah.
And they say that oh no, it's through just like it got carved just like the Grand Canyon through time and time. It's like no, it's everything is just points to things just happen.
Yep. I definitely am a subscriber to cataclysm, or catastrophism rather. Not that I necessarily subscribe to every idea, but the general principle, yeah. I think the forces of destruction are severely underestimated. The fact that we don't find things really doesn't surprise me. I mean, especially when you're talking about like Atlantis, these really far removed civilizations over 10,000 years ago, pre-flood, right? I think it was like 400 feet, or I might have that off by a decimal, maybe 40 feet, whatever. The sea level rise was ridiculous, and it wasn't just a rise of sea level. It came with storms and catastrophes the likes of which we've never seen and can't imagine. And so everything along the coast, everything along rivers, which is where 90% of our population exists today, would have all been wiped out. It's literally sunken under the sea now. So, the idea of like, oh, where's the evidence for Atlantis? And I guess it's a bit cliche. It sank, but yeah, it sank. It's under the ocean. So, and even more recently, you're talking about like why we don't find more in Africa and the Americas and stuff. And I think things get destroyed much, much easier than we like to think they do. Things are a lot more fragile than we like to think they are.
Yeah, and when you're talking about like the out of Africa theory, because like you're familiar with the term haplogroups, right?
Yeah.
And then you've seen the whole map and it just traces genetic markers. And for some reason, they find that Y atom comes from somewhere that's either Cote d'Ivoire. Like when I was growing up, they said humans originated from Ethiopia because that's where they found Lucy. And
which
I was like,
I believe was
that don't even make sense to me as a kid. And then they were like, oh no, it's like from Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. And I'm like, okay. And then they're like, oh, now we have Denisovans and Neanderthals.
And a whole bunch of others. There's a long list, yeah.
Yes, I did see like a really, really funny video. It was like this chick was talking about like there's like so many subspecies of all these different animals like that, and then she's like, but humans, for somehow over hundreds of millions of years of evolution across very distinct geographical areas, somehow cannot be
distinct physical features and behavioral and linguistic and no, it's purely political. I know exactly the video you're talking about because I'm also in the Low Value Mail Discord.
Is it? This is on Telegram, bro.
Oh well, someone posted it in the I do know what video you're talking about.
Chick on the couch.
Yeah, someone posted it in the Discord. But no, she's absolutely right, and it is a purely political thing because the level of distinction between us physically, and I mean we have different bone structures, we have different facial features, we have different skin tones, we have different vocal structures, we have different languages, but I mean just like our actual vocal structures are different. We have different heights and sizes. Like yes, we're obviously different subspecies, and it's purely political that we don't acknowledge that.
I think one of the most apparent ones is because like people talk about mental health is important, And I'm gonna repeat the same thing on bathhouse this week because it's the last one for this special month for some reason. But vitamin D is very important for the
And
mental
we don't get it
status of your
anymore.
brain.
We're all inside all day.
Oh no, not me, bro. I go outside.
I'm speaking in generalities. I'm just talking about our modern lifestyle in general. Like we used to get, as a human species, we used to get a lot more vitamin D, and now we don't. And I agree with you fully.
I wear those I wear really short shorts, no shirt, sit out in the sun for like an hour. Kill a few beers to offset the liver gain. But so the vitamin D is important. But those who are more and more heavily melanated, their body resists the absorption of that. So they don't get sunburn. Like white people get sunburn. Like the less melanin you have, the more sunburn you get. We get more vitamin D.
Yeah.
And you're more receptive to it. The more melanated you are, you don't get sunburn, but you're much less receptive to the vitamin D.
Yeah, you don't do well in Norway where it's dark for a few months of the year
So there is a correlation. So people have always made the correlation. Violent crime increases in the summer because everyone's hot and flustered. People don't mention how mental health incidences increase in certain disadvantaged neighborhoods during the winter months because all I'm saying is
vitamin D plays a crucial role in your hormonal system, and when your hormones are out of whack, your behavior and your mental state's out of whack too. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you.
As a solution for the mental health crisis amongst certain disadvantaged communities, there needs to be a return to latitudes. And trust the science. They've been telling us trust science.
Yeah, you don't have to convince me that everything today is ass backwards. It's it's a deliberate attack on reality, I believe. It's not ignorance, it's not incompetence. There are people that want to control us, and the best way to do that is to sow discord amongst ourselves and make us reliant on the government. I mean, the separation from food, people are so separated from where their food comes from now. And so we are all reliant on grocery stores and corporations and everything quite on our day-to-day basis, so pushing us more and more in that direction, I think is very deliberate. And I think the discord, the chaos, and the attack on reality is all a part of that.
Yeah, I don't know. Everyone's like, oh, why don't you change it? It's I think everyone should just push for a form of just withdraw and isolation. Not social isolation.
Go live in the woods.
Isolation. No, I mean, it would be nice if everyone had the ability to go do that and then be like, yeah, my neighbor's neighbor is I can step outside and I just have to peer down and I peer down the street. Oh, there's somebody over there. That's cool. We just have everyone on top of each other and then once you do realize how there is different physiogenetic expressions based on geography and latitude, you do observe in animals, which we do come from somehow by some sort of design.
If you believe in evolution, which I'm, shifting more and more away from as I learn, there's obviously microevolution. There's obviously a bird can
nervous system. The evolution of the nervous system is very heavily shared amongst. This is the reason why when they test new drugs or just new substances, compounds, they start with insects because they have a fairly similar nervous structure, except they're invertebrates, but the only difference between us and flies and their nervous system is we have dopamine and they have atropamine. Like dude, yeah. In college, I spent a lot of free time just reading really good books about like how natural compounds interact with the human body and how they studied it. But yeah, well, that one of the indicators is how we test like mental drugs, like the way that.
So you're pro evolution because you're saying our central. No,
I have what is it? I the whole thing about us. The only way, like, if I'm pro evolution, that should validate anything that people say that what I say is racist. If we come from monkeys, bro, you can't tell me we come from monkeys because it's one or the other. It's one or the other.
No, I hear what you're saying. I personally don't even. It's not something that I'm all that invested in. Like I wouldn't even necessarily argue against evolution strongly, but it is. I am finding myself leaning more and more away from it as I learn more. There are some pretty big holes in it, but there's kind of holes in all of these ideas. Is the end conclusion that you kind of reach. So.
I mean, once they started finding out you can earn funding and money by having like scientific exploration. Like they're like, okay, well we're done. We've traveled all the different parts of the world, right? They're like, okay, what else can we explore? We can only zoom in on stuff now.
Yeah, there's still a lot pretty unexplored.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand like, we need this much money for fuel and supplies to like go into. I mean, one of the most unexplored places in the world is southern Colombia. Like the jungle is just like the jungle and the geology and the geography of it is just so like. First off, you can't go there because the northern part of southern Colombia is controlled by FARC, which is their sort of like socialist, yet they're running. You heard of FARC? FARC?
Not so much. But by the way, the meeting's ending in 2 minutes, so you're gonna get hung up on soon here. But I agree. Like, there's a lot that is still pretty unexplored, or at least not recently explored. And that's the world's not that big.
I'm excited for Iran because they just laid claim to Antarctica. So
yeah, they did.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck that means. I mean, shit, start shooting missiles and like, hey, Antarctica's our little firing range. Let's see if we can get there. What is it? Was it there just some private U.S. company that just tried to land? Who just said that they landed a lunar on the moon, like a probe on the.
There's been a couple countries that have done it. I know Japan and I think maybe India.
All right, bro. Yeah, the country that doesn't adopt indoor plumbing somehow landed shit on the moon.
Right. But yeah, there's been a few probes to the moon in the last couple months, supposedly at least.
I mean, it's all a question. I don't get too. I mean, I'm just having fun with this. If anybody comes after me and I'm like, bro, you take yourself way too seriously, or you're like investing your ass, trying to protect your assets. But yeah, anyway, cool stuff, man.
Yeah, man.
Hear you on Thursday.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for calling in. Gonna go ahead and launch a new meeting here. And we'll talk a little bit about religion, maybe. But that was a good call-in. I enjoyed that. If my computer will actually, function. Alrighty, I am back. And here is the new link if someone else wants to call in. Yeah, so the Antarctica thing, a little bit of serendipity. Like the Y-Files just did an episode on Antarctica, and I like their show. That's a fun show. And Robert Seffer, who I'm not sure what to think about this guy, but he just did a show on Antarctica, and Antarctic Nazis, and moon Nazis, and also Iran, laying claim to Antarctica was in there. They're fun stories. They're fun theories. Antarctica connects to Hollow Earth and the Vril and the Nazis and the Aryans. Um, I don't know how much weight I put towards them. Not a whole lot. I haven't ever seen anything to actually indicate there's any truth to them. I've just seen some really fun stories. If someone has some compelling evidence, that'd be awesome. Show it to me. That sounds rather interesting. But I think they're just fun stories. I think. Who knows? There is some very weird things with Antarctica. How no one's allowed there. It's also the fact that it used to be tropical. The fact that when you drill down beneath the ice, you're pulling up like palm fronds and stuff like that, which was frozen. Rather, like it's this tropical land seems to have been flash frozen. That ties into catastrophism and ideas like that, which I am more open to. There's definitely some very interesting things going on with Antarctica. I'm just not so sure it's Nazis. So I trust Zephyr. You don't think you trust Zephyr. That little heart, man, I hate that thing. I was highly skeptical of him for a long time. I really wasn't paying attention to him, and then he started saying some things that I liked and agreed with, and I was like, oh, maybe this guy's all right. And then he goes back to moon Nazis, and I'm like, no, maybe my first instinct was the one I should have held on to. But he's interesting, at least, if nothing else. Okay, so religion. Why were the gods real? Why am I convinced the gods were real? And I was talking a little bit about it, just this sheer time scale that we're dealing with. Most of these stories, most of these myths and religions, they don't start with the flood. The flood was 10 to 12,000 years ago. They have stories going on before that. You have the Mayans and you have Hindu, which have a golden age previously, and then a silver age, and then a monkey man age, which also kind of somewhat like pre-human. That lines up, right? If with evolution, if that's the path we're following. And these are very separated. I mean, the Americas and India, but they have a lot of consistency in their religion and the story, and going way back into the previous ages. You also have Solon talking to the Egyptian priests. Yeah, I just don't know what to think of him, to be fully honest. I don't know what to think about Zephyr. I'm skeptical of him. I think he does say some good things. I still don't know what to think of him. But you have Solon talking to the ancient Egyptian priests. They talk about multiple cataclysms, multiple ages before us. And I don't know if they referred to it as a golden age, but they referred to it as, a highly technological age, more advanced than they are now. And so that's Egypt, that's India, that's the Americas, all telling the same story. You have the flood all across the entire world being told as the same story, and those stories not starting with the flood. So we're going back over 10,000 years of history here, and these stories have survived. And even more recently, like in Cappadocia, there's this mother goddess that evidence of her has been found going back 8,000 years. Quite likely she's older than that. The power of destruction is not to be underestimated, right? But this is already in prehistory. This is already before written language, supposedly. Okay, and they have this mother goddess who is this Venus figure sitting on a throne with a lion on either side of her. Okay, and again, prehistory, so we really know very little. We just have some figurines to go off of. But in that same area, you have that same figure repeatedly showing up all the way through Greek and Roman times. So a span of roughly 6,000 years, you have this exact same goddess showing up and consistently being present throughout all of the different cultures and civilizations that existed in that time. Because it's not even close to one civilization just perpetuating this. It's you're again warring states. You have these outside forces coming over and taking over, yet the goddess survives. Okay. And the idea of this surviving, to me, if it's not based on something real, is extremely unlikely to me. You have these stories of the gods coming down and interacting. I've talked about the tabernacle in the Bible, this highly, highly specific thing, this construction for God to reside in when he's on earth, for Yahweh. And so I'm thinking about this, right? And if gods were real, one, that would be pretty much the most important piece of information to keep alive for a couple of reasons. One, it's just significant. You would want to know that, right? Like that's the most, I can't think of much else that would be more important than that. But for two, these old gods, right? These rather human and emotional gods, if they were coming down, you know, they're telling you their story. They go, hey, here's my feats, worship me, revere me, sacrifice to me, and you forget their story and they come back, they're like, what, where's my worship and stuff, you know, that might have some very serious consequences for you. So as a very direct importance on your life and your lineage's well-being, you know, keeping these stories intact might have a very practical, very important purpose, right, for your own preservation. But without that real element, without these real gods, and potentially even the intervention and the continuation of these stories through global cataclysms like the global flood 12,000 years ago, and you still have all of these surviving stories, it's quite possibly because these gods are re-providing these stories. There wasn't even supposed to be written language for 6,000 years. From the time of the flood until when written language is invented, it was 6,000 years. But all of this history, through all of that cataclysm, through all wars and famines and everything else that happens to humanity, they kept that story alive and unmolested for 6,000 years without even having written language. And then in Sumeria, you have, like I said, the story of Moses and the Great Flood, almost identical to how you find it in the Bible. That's a degree of separation of like 4,000 years, even more. And so even that is absolutely remarkable to me. Without that, and now we know that a global flood did occur, right? Now we know that. But yeah, it's based on real stuff. That's really the conclusion I keep coming to. It's such a large topic. You're talking about over 10,000 years of history across the entire globe, all the different civilizations and cultures. And so trying to draw these connections, it's really straining the limits of my mental capacity just to even think about it properly. To try and translate that into coherent thoughts for you is well beyond my mental capabilities, to be quite frank, but I'm attempting to do it anyways, so I appreciate your patience while you listen to me ramble. But yeah, I definitely had some other points I wanted to make. One of them was about the degradation of information. Just how underestimated it is. And this is maybe a silly example, but it's one that, you know, I think its silliness almost demonstrates its significance, if you will. When I got into gardening, I started learning about the plants in my yard, and I was absolutely amazed as I was learning more and more about the plants just in my tiny little yard, how many of them were medicinal. And a lot of them were like, oh, it'll help your tummy ache, you know, make some tea with it. It's rather insignificant medicinal qualities, right? Not that it's entirely useless, but rather insignificant. A lot of them, though, were not insignificant at all. They were like really true medicines that had really significant effects. And this was just what's growing in my yard, like an extremely small localized sample. And Mark was talking about this. Mark, who's going to be on the show next week, I hope and believe, on Danny's show, about how not that long ago, like our great grandparents' time, even our grandparents' time, America had all of these natural remedies. They had all of these medicines. We understood, and I've talked about this in the past. I mean, you have the survival rates over 90% of trepanning in ancient cultures, and we have a 74%. I think I misquoted it as 84% a few times. I think it's 74%. So a really, really significant improvement in survival rates in the ancient past compared to what we have today with modern medicine. And this was being used in the exact same manner for blunt force head trauma. And they were far outdoing us in the past. And there's a lot of other examples of medicine in the past, you know, silphium and many more. So we had this knowledge 150 years ago. We knew all about these natural remedies, totally erased now, totally gone now. If you look up these plants, the first Google results for pretty much all the plants in my yard are telling me they're poisonous, to stay away from them. But when you dig a little bit deeper, you go, oh yeah, no, they're edible, they're medicinal, they're really fantastic plants. They really have a lot of uses. But that's totally been covered up by the pharmaceutical industry. And we now have more access to this information than ever before, right? It like I said, the first Google results tell me they're poisonous, but you dig a little bit deeper, the information is out there. It is accessible to people, and yet fewer and fewer people actually know this information than ever before. And this is just like what's taking place in my own lifetime that I'm witnessing in front of me. There's known knowns, there's known unknowns, and there's unknown unknowns. And the extent of information loss, of information degradation, and of destruction is very much an unknown unknown. I think that most people are thinking about it in entirely many orders of magnitude removed from just how significant it's actually taking place in the world. And I mean, we're living in a very peaceful time period. I'm talking about as far as natural disasters. There's not really great volcanoes or great anything going on right now, but over the last 10,000 years, there's been a whole lot of massive solar flares, which they didn't have the electrical grid to worry about, but it'll still fry you. You know, massive volcano, massive all kinds of things. The information loss cannot be underestimated, and yet you still see these religions and these ideas, these gods surviving for tens of thousands of years. It's got to be based on something real. So let's see what you fellas have been saying here in the chat. Dandelion, yeah, dandelion is a very powerful medicine, honestly. A lot. There's so much. It's ridiculous. It's insane. And that's, like I said, that's almost like a silly example. And I think that just goes to highlight how easy it is, though, how significantly information can be lost and how quickly. It's crazy, man. Would I submit myself to these gods? I don't know enough about them to answer that, to be honest. They're not around anymore. So one of the other things I covered last week was the disappearance of the gods. And even in like Roman and Greek religions, you see an evolution of their religion. They change quite significantly from their earliest forms. But when you go back to the earliest forms of pretty much all of the religions, they do seem to share a common origin. They do seem to be telling largely the same story, talking largely about the same figures, and recording the same history, the same flood, the same ages before. You have these increased lifespans in the Bible, in Egyptian religion, in Sumerian religion, in Mayan. I'm not 100% sure about the Mayans actually, but I know in Hinduism, in these golden age before the flood, they also talk about living 10,000-year lifespans and stuff. So many consistencies across this stuff. But as for the gods, yeah, I don't. They're sorry, the gods disappearing. That's what I was talking about. So in the Bible, King Solomon, about 2,500 years ago, was the last person to interact with God. And it's entirely possible you can argue that God actually disappeared from Earth a decent while before that. So it's been at least a few thousand years since these gods have been around. And I think they could be coming back. I think that there's a lot of prophecy about them coming back at the end of times, and you looking at Hinduism and Mayan religions and stuff, you see this theme of they seem to come around the cataclysms. So if there is this cyclical cataclysm, they show up maybe a little bit before it, right? And then they're around after it to help restart things, essentially. And with the spicy sun, I think we're reaching that end of this cycle. And so we might be seeing the gods again soon, and I might be having to figure out an answer to that question. But currently, I don't have an answer. I don't know them. I don't know them, so I can't answer that. But we might get to know them real soon, like within our lifetimes. Yeah, the Bible starts before the flood too. Absolutely. Yeah, catastrophism. I don't necessarily have solid, firm ideas on all of it, beliefs on all of it, as far as like Vimenko and stuff, the crustal displacement stuff like that. I don't know. Not so sure about that. I'm open to it, but I do believe in the spicy sun. I do believe plasma cosmology is far more accurate as to how our cosmos work than our current model, and everything in plasma cosmology points towards the sun getting real spicy in the coming years. So I think that the cyclical cataclysm is likely due to the sun, and I think it booty blasts us pretty hard, roughly every 12,000 years. Maybe it skips a cycle sometimes, potentially even every 6,000 years. I have a very loose idea about a reset happening 6,000 years. I know a popular idea is that Atlantis was 12,000 years ago. Absolutely nothing happened for 6,000 years. And then at the 6,000 year mark, the Sumerians rediscover it and relaunch this civilization, and they relaunch this technology and all this stuff. And that just doesn't make sense to me. A 6,000 year gap of just absolutely nothing happening, and then this big relaunching emergence of this high tech civilization. If makes much more sense, there was something right before that 6,000 year mark. There was another reset potentially, but that's a very loose idea. I don't have a whole lot of supporting evidence. It just makes sense to me. Yeah, don't underestimate the Force or the Schwartz. Chris Chan was quite recent. I don't know what that has anything to do with. Where did the energy come from? Do they pay? We don't know shit. NPK. Yep, the good stuff. Yep, the good stuff. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. You had like actual weed growing in your yard, like ruderalis, or maybe a bird dropped some actual seeds. What'd you have growing there? That's interesting. Doxed. Am I doxed? Did I dox myself? I might have. I'm not too worried about it. Yeah, I think that I mean most modern medicines are like extracts of plants. At least that's where they started. And now because of patents and everything, they're taking extracts from plants and then trying to molecularly manipulate them so they can patent them better. But yeah, like that's where our medicine comes from, is plants. Using plants as medicine isn't this kooky idea. It's what we still do today. We've just bastardized it in the name of money. So lactobacilli are great. That's a fun fact, Mr. Galunas. Yeah, I don't know all of the history of the pharmaceutical industry, but that rings true to me, Mr. Slav. Totally sounds right to me. I'm way behind in this chat. Or no, I'm caught up now. Okay. Did I get your Discord thingy? I don't know. I'll look after the show. Um, yeah, I'll look after the show. Little can't read it because of that thing. But all right, fellas. Hope you enjoyed the show. If anyone else has any other comments, drop them now. Or if you have any guest recommendations, let me know. You can contact me through Discord. Uh, I'm in the low value mail Discord. I think most of you are too. I'm not 100% sure. Um, I will drop my email right now if you want another way to contact me. You can go to that email right there. And yeah, if you have any guest recommendations, especially if you give me an email address to contact them with, if you give me the email address, I promise I will contact them. I'll reach out to them. Next week, I'm pretty sure we're going to have a guest on, Mark, who was on Danny's show last week. So I'm very excited about that. I think that'll be a really good episode. As long as tech allows it and I don't mess it up too bad on that front, I think it'll be great. So with that, have a good week, fellas, and I'll catch you next time. Yeah, drop that in the email. I'll definitely reach out. So cool beans, fellas. There we go. All right, cool beans. See you later, guys.